Hello everyone, salam, namaste, adab, and welcome to today's event. It is our privilege to introduce to you a very senior civil servant, very respectable civil servant of India, Dr. S.Y. Quraishi, who was the Chief Election Commissioner, as well as Director General of Doordarshan, and he had held many other senior positions at secretary level in different ministries. He is a very prominent and outspoken person in India on issues related to civil society, elections, health, and other interests concerning people. And to give an opening remark, we have invited Ms. Poonam Mutreja, who is the Executive Director of Population Foundation of India, as well as she is also connected with the country director of John D. and Catherine MacArthur Foundation, as well as Ashoka Foundation and many other institutions. And for concluding remark, we have a very senior journalist, columnist, and broadcaster, Mr. Pushpesh Pant. So I'll invite Ms. Poonam Mutreja for a formal introduction and opening remarks for the event. Ms. Poonam.
Thank you, Razi Saab. It's an absolute honor and pleasure to be part of this event and talking about Dr. S.Y. Quraishi's book on the population myth, which is timely and much needed. It's a much needed resource that demystifies the myths around the Muslim fertility rate in the country. It also succinctly traces the Islamic tenets that are pro-family planning and educate and encourage smaller families in their religious discourse. The book shows how the writings in Quran and the Hadith align with the contemporary family planning, reproductive health issues that advocate for women's health, reproductive and population stabilization. According to the book, Islam is one of the first religions in the world to have advocated for smaller families even before the population debate and policies were ever in place. It underlines how the need for contraception and spacing to regulate fertility amongst couples were brought into the religious discourse even during those early years when there was no compelling population control or pressures. An interesting aspect of the book is its ability to link both evidence from the Indian population data and from ideology to nullify the political propaganda against Muslims who are time and again blamed for India's population explosion in the country. I must share with you, first of all, there is no population explosion in India. Population is stabilizing in India. And I will share some data with you. And the population is stabilizing for all religions and declining very rapidly, especially in the last 2 decades. In fact, in the last 2 decades, and especially the last decade, the census data, which is very robust data, India has produced for a very, very long period of time, over 10 years for the last one, census, we find that the highest decline in population was amongst the Muslim community. In recent times, the discourse around implementation of what is being called two-child policy, which is coercive, which brings in incentives and disincentives, is actually designed to attack one community on population explosion. And anybody who was to read Dr. Quraishi's book will find it hard to believe the myth and misconception created by the political dispensation in India, in much of the country. There is no national or global evidence in any case to show that population control measures work. In fact, stringent population control measures can lead to negative consequences, as we saw during the emergency in India. Studies have shown that the states that implemented a two-child norm, though they only did it for panchayat level, and now in UP and in Assam, it is being recommended that we have a two-child norm at not just panchayat levels, but for people working in government and so on and so forth. Of course, they're not talking about Rajya Sabha members, legislative assemblies, or national or the Lok Sabha and the national assemblies, because even in UP, where they're pushing for a two-child norm very strongly, and have made a draft bill to do so with terrible consequences and incentives and disincentives. In UP, 53% of the legislative assembly have more than two children. And by the way, they are primarily, as you know, from one community, which is the Hindu community. And not that I think there's anything wrong in having more than two children, but I'm just making a statement. There is national, in fact, stringent population control measures can lead to negative consequences, which we have seen in studies that in states that have implemented the two-child norm, it's resulted in an increase in sex selection, which means adverse sex ratios, which means that we are practicing sex-selective abortion. We've seen an increase in unsafe abortions, men divorcing their wives to stand for panchayat elections, and families give up children for adoption and avoid disqualification. In September this year, many of you in the US may have read about the study or heard the Pew Research Center, a well-reputed research organization based in the US, released a study called Religious Composition of India, which describes trends in religious groups in India: Hindus, Muslims, Christians, Sikhs, Jains, and Buddhists. The Pew Charitable Trust report is based on the analysis of the National Family Health Survey 4, which is it is every 5 to 7 years, there is a survey which covers 5 years called National Family Health Survey, which is done by a very reputed Indian institution called the International Institute for Population Studies, which was set up by the government of India. In fact, it is a government of India autonomous research institute. And NFHS 4 data confirms, as I was mentioning earlier also, using the census data, confirms that declining trends in population growth and fertility is falling among all religious groups in India, and the religious composition of India's population has remained largely stable, and this is so from independence. The evidence shows that variations in population growth rates, of course, by religion and regions, depend on the level of education, literacy, nutrition, employment opportunities, and development opportunities. And might I say, access to reproductive health services, especially family planning. The poorer you are, the more illiterate you are likely to not have less access to family planning services. So given the socio-economic situation in India, fertility decline, overall socio-economic development, fertility decline is a natural phenomena. Further, NFHS informs us that fertility rates for religious groups vary between states. For instance, I would like to share that fertility rates amongst Hindus in Uttar Pradesh, in Bihar is much higher than those of Hindus in Kerala. The fertility rate of Muslims in UP is also higher than fertility rates of Muslims in Kerala, which is 1.86, while it is 3.10 for Muslims in UP. Muslim women in southern states, which have better literacy rates, which have better health services, better governance, these states, the fertility of Hindu women is much better compared to the northern. And also fertility rate amongst Muslim women in Kerala, as I said, 1.86, and Tamil Nadu is 1.74. While Hindu women in Bihar, it's 3.29 and 2.6. So it's not a question of any religion. It's a question of what your education is and income levels are. And the book reveals that a large proportion, Dr. Quraishi has done a brilliant a lot of analysis, research, use robust data from all the different data sets that exist in India. And the book reveals a large proportion of the marginalized communities, including Muslims, still remain unreached by most of the development programs, not just family planning programs. The larger issue lies in reaching these communities with greater access to education, health services, and especially sexual and reproductive health and family planning, so that their birth outcomes improve and communities opt for fewer children, which is what they want. In India, people do not wish to have more than 2 children. In fact, 1.8 children is the data from the NFHS 4, as well as for the states in which NFHS 5 results have come out. So I would like to end by saying that there are a few things we need to do to stabilize India's population, because people want fewer children. People can't afford to have more children, and we need to end this debate. And we need to end the debate of the 2-child norm and the myth that there is a population explosion amongst Muslims. The kind of misinformation that has been spread, and therefore Dr. Quraishi's book is very timely. And the title is something that I said to Dr. Quraishi then, and I want to repeat now, really deals with the times. And all of us in India, whether we are academics or we are activists or we are working on health and the media, have to really work together to smash this myth that there is a huge Muslim growth rate happening in India, and that Muslims will overtake Hindus, and this is creating it's being politically used to create insecurity amongst a very large population in India. And I think that the responsibility lies, Dr. Quraishi has brought out the book, the responsibility lies, as Raji Saab has done this seminar. We need to do many more, not just seminars, but the journalists and everyone need to take the responsibility to break this myth and blow this myth, and not allow religious polarization or wrong policies which will impact us being able to provide services to our women who desperately need family planning services, and they also need to be empowered to access the services that exist. And finally, we need very good behavior change communication that can communicate with the people of India and the rest of the world. And we do have programs. I curated a program called Main Kuch Bhi Kar Sakti Hu, which is to empower women to be able to not only exercise their rights, but also to be educated on issues of family planning and violence against women and all these issues which are also linked. And this has been shown on Doordarshan, and we've reached 400 million people cumulative across India. And we need to do a lot more. And I'm very happy to, before I finish, say that recently a statement made by the central government, which said they're against the two-child norm, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, when we advocated with them, they made a very strong statement against the two-child norm, but that doesn't stop many states who have total fertility decline and minus fertility rates from saying we too want the two-child norm. So we have to just stop all this. And so thank you very much for the opportunity. And Dr. Quraishi, your book is something I quote, we use, we share with political leaders all the time. Thank you very much.
I suppose I can start.
Quraishi sahab, sure.
Shukriya. Poonam ji, you have made my task easier because quite a few things which I'm going to say you have mentioned.
I'm sorry. Sorry.
Yeah. So you have made my task easier because some of the things which you mentioned, I'll also be mentioning. So it will be a reiteration of what you have already highlighted. Just one comment, you said the book is timely, and this is an expression I've heard from many people. But it just now occurred to me while I heard it from you, maybe this book is 25 years too late, because this is something in the last 25 years, the kind of propaganda that yes, Muslims are coming, they're going to become majority, they will capture power. This campaign has been on for a long, long time. And secondly, my conclusion of the book actually were arrived at exactly 25 years ago when I wrote a paper on the request of UNFPA. This book is an accidental product because they came to me, the then country director of UNFPA was a Canadian national and not an Indian Canadian, a white Canadian. He said, Mr. Quraishi, we would like you to write an approach paper on family planning among the Muslims because they have the least family planning. And I was taken aback because I'm not an Islamic scholar, nor had I ever worked in family planning department. And on his insistence, he was offering me a pretty lucrative consultancy, 1.5 lakh rupees for 1 month. My salary at that time was 5,000 rupees. So I should have been tempted, but somehow an inner voice said that I should do it gratis, pro bono. And I insisted that I'll charge nothing. And then he got after, we haggled, and finally we agreed on a royal sum of 1 rupee. That now if it is 1 rupee or 1 million, it's a financial transaction. So we have to go through all the procedures. So I asked him to write to me so that I take Government of India permission. And then we signed the contract, and I started researching for this. It took me longer than 1 month. It took me 5 months actually, because it was I was not doing it full time. But it opened my eyes. The kind of myths which I'm going to bust just today, I was equally a victim of those myths as most Indians are these days are, because the way this is being propagated. So if we can come to the presentation, somebody can uplink the presentation. I have a PowerPoint presentation, which makes it easier. But next, please. Next slide, please. Yeah, these myths are creating fear and hostility among the Hindus against the Muslims. Hindus are in danger. Muslims are going to capture power. This is the fear. And obviously, the kind of alarm which it is raising among the Hindus is can be understood. Next, please. Now, I'm dealing with 5 myths. Myth number 1, the Muslims produce too many children and are solely responsible for the population explosion. Now, the impression created was, and I'm sure so you will bear me out, that if a Hindu family had 2 children, Muslims have 8 to 10 children. That is the impression everybody has. That is the impression I had. But I have shown in this book on all Government of India data, the NFHS data, entirely Government of India, that at no point in time the gap between Hindus and Muslims was more than 1 child, 1.1 to be precise. And that also has come down to 0.48, less than half a child. because Muslims are catching up with the Hindus very fast. They're adopting a family planning faster than the Hindus. Now, yes, it is true that Muslims have the lowest level of family planning, 45%. And their TFR, let me explain for those who would like to be clear about TFR, total fertility rate, which is the number of children a woman will produce in her lifetime. Now, Muslim TFR is 2.61, which is the highest, no doubt. But the fact that the Hindus are not far behind, their number two is completely suppressed, perhaps deliberately. If Muslims have 45% family planning acceptance, Hindus have only 54%. And compare it with Sikhs who are 80%. Now, the same Sikhs who are called Khalistani at the drop of a hat, now they are the most patriotic. In the independence address, last independence address, Prime Minister linked population growth and to patriotism, which means people who adopt family planning the best, they are the most patriotic, which means the Sikhs are the most patriotic. And the Muslims are the least, followed by the Hindus. Now, why is this fact ignored? And I'll show you its impact in a later slide. Now, between 1951 till 2011 census, so 60 years, the net increase in Muslim population was 13.6 crores, and of Hindus, 67.6 crores, 5 times. Now, who is therefore contributing to population explosion? Look at the figures, Government of India figures. Right. Then the gap between Muslim and Hindu population increased from 26.7 crores to 80.8 crores. That means in 1951, there were 26 crore more Hindus. Now there are 80 crore more Hindus, and they're being made to feel threatened by the Muslims. Now that is the funny part of this campaign. Now, obviously, the propaganda that Muslims are overtaking the Hindus is absolutely absurd. Next slide, please. Now, the second myth is that the Muslim population growth is upsetting the demographic balance, which means proportion of various religious groups within the population. To some extent, it is true in the sense that in those 60 years under study, the Hindu population from 84.1% came down to 79.8. Now, this is an increase of 4.4 percentage points in 60 years for the Muslims, because Muslims increased from 9.8 to 14.2. Now, 4.4 in 60 years. They were 10% in 1951. Now, to become a majority, which means 51%, how many years will they take? If they have taken 60 years to increase 4%, they will take 600 years to become 51%. And to say, but they're coming to power tomorrow, in 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, many times the date has been announced that in 3 years, 5 years, they're capturing political power, they'll become majority. So here is the reality. I've already mentioned how the gap between Hindus and Muslims has come down from 1.1 to 0.48. Next, please. Now, this is the declining rate from, if you see the first bar, it is 1.1, and it has now come down to less than half. So this is how the gap is reducing. And I'm sure Poonamji will perhaps give a date at the end, how soon the two figures will merge. Next, please. Myth number 3. That there is an organized conspiracy by Muslims to overtake the Hindu population to capture political power. And they are about to succeed very, very soon. And in the process, the right-wingers appeal to Hindus to produce 8 to 10 children. That you produce more children, otherwise the Muslims will come to power. Now imagine if this procreation war begins between Hindus and Muslims, where will India end? My appeal through the book to the Muslim community is that don't react to this propaganda. Fortunately, even Hindus have not responded to this. Even they are not producing 8 to 10 children. They are accepting family planning also. And in any case, Muslims should ignore the propaganda. They should adopt family planning very proactively, because family planning is a good thing. And our national population policy of 2000 is excellent, and it has achieved the results it has set out to do, as Poonamji pointed out in her presentation. Now, I have not seen or heard any Muslim scholar or leader who has asked Muslims to produce more children to overtake Hindus. Not one, not one. Of course, we have come across local imams and local mullahs telling Muslims not to accept family planning because they think that Islam is against family planning, not for any political reason. Now, in order to set this controversy at rest for all time, I requested a friend of mine, Professor Dinesh Singh, who was Vice Chancellor of Delhi University, to prepare a mathematical model for me. I gave him all my data of the last 70 years. And I said, if this is the rate at which we have grown, Muslims have grown, how soon Muslims can overtake political power? He says, Bhaijan, forget about it. Never, not in 1,000 years, never. And maybe I think if you see the next graph, that will show you what it means. The mathematical model by Professor Dinesh Singh and Professor Ajay Kumar, neither of them is my cousin. And now they have proved that this myth is totally a bogey. Next, please. Now, this is the graph. The bottom line is the growth of Muslims. The upper line is the growth of Hindus. And they say that Muslims are going to capture political power. They're going to overtake Hindus. I think, as they say, a picture says 1,000 words. This graph says 1,000 words. And this is prepared by the two professors of mathematics, very eminent scientists, and who are killing the debate for all of us. Next, please. Myth number 4. Muslims use polygamy for increasing population. Even Mr. Narendra Modi, when he was chief minister after a Godhra thing, in his public speeches, he used to say, Hum 5, hamare 25, we 5 over 25, meaning that I have 4 wives and 25 children. And now what we hear, Hum 4, hamare 40, that we have our 4 wives and our 40 children. Now, I would like to ask these leaders, very respectfully with folded hand, to show me one such Muslim who fits this description in 1.38 billion population. Show me one. I haven't seen any. I don't know whether you have. Now, in fact, there was one Government of India study in 1975, Status of Women in India Committee, which went into various issues about the status of women. And it found that all communities had some polygamy and Muslims were the least polygamous. Next slide, please. I'll show you the graph. Yes, this is the graph. It found that the tribal communities and tribals are normally Hindus, maybe some Christians, 15% polygamy. Then the Buddhists, then the Jains, then Hindus 5.8, Muslims 5.7. The least polygamous people found in India by that study, Government of India study, mind you, shows that Muslims are the least polygamous. Here, there is an interesting question that if we are not polygamous, why are we fighting for this right of polygamy? If the government comes out with a bill that polygamy should be banned, I think Muslims should be the first to demand, because if you're not practicing it, so why can't you demand that it should be banned? And Muslims will be the least affected. The more affected will be those who are practicing polygamy more. In any case, to see whether this is a one-off study, one criticism which I heard, oh, you are quoting a 30-year-old study, 40-year. What can I do if there has been only one study? If you show me a study done 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I'll quote that. In any case, to cross-check whether this is a freak figure, I looked at the census of 1931, 41, and 51 to see what has been the trend, and exactly the same trend was found through those censuses. So this study only captured what had been happening for 30, 40 years when the figures were taken. Next slide, please. Now, this is an interesting thing which had never struck me. It had not struck many people as they have admitted to me. Polygamy in India is impossible. It cannot happen because there are no women. For 1,000, the gender ratio is against women in India for the last 100 years, which is a sad story in itself, and which one should go into it. Why? Because of the discrimination, they're not even allowed to be born. there is a female infanticide, feticide, and as a result, the gender ratio is adverse. For 1,000 men, there are only 940 women, according to the last census. And I picked up a recent figure, according to which it has come down to 922. For 1,000 women, only 922 women exist. If I want to marry a second woman, the second woman does not exist, because there are 80 people out of 1,000 who do not have even one wife, because the women do not exist. Now, therefore, to say that hum panch hamare 25 from the top guy in the country, how the imagine I don't know, I don't want to comment on it. Now, another thing here I found in polygamy, there is a myth among the Muslims also, which needs to change, because Muslims believe a sense of entitlement, that I'm entitled to 4 wives. Now, let me tell you what is the reality of that. There is only one verse in the whole Quran which talks of polygamy, and where Allah says that you can marry 2, 3, or 4. Immediately I go running to find my second, third, and fourth wife without listening to the whole ayat. Now, what follows is, provided you can treat them equally. And God only knows, howsoever ardent may be your desire to treat them equally, it is not easy, it's not possible. Therefore, you are advised to marry one. So operational clause is marry one. Now, from this, I have heard lots of ulama, I have read the commentaries, the ulama say that actually it is just it's a permission, not an injunction to marry 4. It's a permission that you can marry up to 4. There is a limit set, because before that there was no limit at all in the Arab world, pre-Islamic Arab world. So actually a limit has been set, and that too is a permission with a condition of absolute equality, which is difficult. Now, what ulama have missed, and I have never seen, somebody should show me now, I have never seen that actually there is a bigger condition before this ayat, in the beginning of this ayat. This ayat is about orphans, which includes widows. You know, there used to be lots of orphans and widows because of the tribal warfare. Men would get killed and widows and children would be left behind. It was the question of security of those widows, particularly those widows who had children. Now, Allah is saying in that ayat, this is about orphans. If treat the orphans with justice, do not misappropriate their property, do not substitute their good things with your bad things. And the best will be that from among the orphans, marry 2, 3, or 4. Therefore, the first condition is you can marry only if you're going to marry a widow or an orphan, not anyone. Otherwise, if you see the advertisement in the Hindustan Times looking for a virgin, when people go looking for a wife, they are looking for a virgin. Now here the ayat very clearly says that from among the orphans you can marry 2, 3, or 4. Now why have we not heard a single alim or ulama mention this? Why was it left to an illiterate man like me to hit upon this point? Surah Nisa, ayat number 3. Please go to this and see. Next, please. Now, myth number 5, Islam against family planning. Again, this is addressed more to the Muslims and also to the non-Muslims, that Islam is not against family planning, as Poonamji also referred to, of course, quoting my book. Nowhere has the Quran prohibited family planning. Now, whatever Allah wanted to prohibit, He has said it specifically. In fact, there is an ayat in the Quran which says that हम जो चीजें आपको बैन करना चाहते थे हमने तुमको समझा दी हैं. Rape haram, sharab haram, chori haram, sood lena haram. So whatever was to be banned, Allah has banned already very specifically. It's not that Allah forgets. Oh, He forgot to talk about family planning. Ayat says that whatever we wanted to ban for you, we have explicitly explained to you. Now, there is no prohibition of family planning in the entire Quran. Now, there are verses of the Quran which people have cited for or against. There are only interpretations and no specific ban. Now, I like, if we produce you, we will also feed you and things like that. Don't kill your daughters for fear of poverty, because if they are born, we will feed them. So now these are the verses which are quoted in favor of family planning, against family planning. But actually, um, uh, um, I have only seen that the sterilization is banned according to all interpretations, not in the Quran, but according to all interpretations of all ulama, nationally, internationally, sterilization is banned. But birth spacing not only allowed, but encouraged. Even the compulsory 2 years of breastfeeding of a child is a part of delaying the process of the next birth. Now, according to me, I went through the Quran and the Hadith. To me, this verse which I'm going to read out to you, is a clinching verse. Surah Nur, ayat 33. Let those who do not have the means for marriage keep themselves chaste until Allah gives them means out of His grace. यानी जब तक आप इस लायक ना हो जाओ, जब तक शादी न करना, जब तक इस लायक ना हो जाओ कि बीवी बच्चे पाल सको, जब तक तो और अपने को चेस्ट रखने के लिए, क्योंकि उस जमाने में सेक्सुअल डिजायर्स भी बड़ी हाई होती है, to keep yourself, you should keep yourself chaste till Allah gives you means to enable you to get married. Now, if somebody went to the Quran, according to Sharia, Sharia is nothing but a path, and Quran is like the constitution. Hadith is like the acts which are passed under it, whatever Prophet did or said. So, and after that, the interpretation by the jurists and so on. So, now somebody went to the Prophet and he said, I'm a poor guy. I do not have the means to marry. I'm very, very poor, but I have my sexual desires. What should I do? Next slide, please. Yes. So he said, I do not, I have my sexual desires, although I'm poor, what should I do? So Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he repeated that ayat and he said, till you are in a position to afford a family, you should resort to fasting. Roza rakho. Roza suppresses sexual desires. So now the complete interpretation, recommendation for family planning ho gayi. Delay the marriage till you are able to afford a family. Now, third is the hadith. So first was an ayat, second was the hadith, the third is also a hadith. A person who had many children, he went to the Prophet and he said that I have got many children, I don't want any more, and I want to practice al-azl, which is coitus interruptus, or in common language, withdrawal method. I want to practice that, but a Jew says that this is minor infanticide. So on that, Prophet said, no, the Jew lied, which means it is the coitus interruptus. Azl is not minor infanticide. If you want to practice that, go ahead and do it. So together, these three are a complete recommendation and mandate for family planning, which is why I say, and Professor Abdurrahim Umran of Al-Azhar University in 1992-93 in a book, he had pointed out that it is a marvel, it is amazing that 1400 years ago, when there was no population pressure anywhere in the world, Islam was talking of restricting your family, small size. So and there are whole lots of ahadith which talk of need for proper upbringing, proper legacy, अपने बच्चों की सेहत, माँ बीवी की सेहत, बच्चों की upbringing, वगैरह वगैरह. So which emphasize the quality of life. Next, please. Now, it is not a Hindu-Muslim issue at all. In fact, I feel very embarrassed. Now I've got a little bit of thick skin. But when I first started talking of Hindu-Muslim, I was extremely embarrassed. That's the last thing I would have wanted to do. But what to do, because the subject demanded the use of this language. It's not a Hindu versus Muslim issue at all, because the real factors are not religion. The factors which determine family planning behavior are several, particularly three. One, literacy, especially of girls. Second, the income of the family. The third is service delivery, the reach and access to service delivery. Now, secondly, the interstate and interregional variations. Poonamji also pointed out. Now, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, southern Indian state, they have very low fertility. If you see in the third bullet, Lowest TFR is in Kerala 1.56. The highest TFR is in Bihar 3.41. Now, which one of this would you like to say is a national average? It's not a national average. It's not a national TFR. Kerala TFR is different. Bihar TFR is different because socio-economic conditions of the two states are different. Now, the next bullet is also very interesting. In 25 states, Muslims have lower TFR than Hindus in Bihar. Lower TFR than Hindus in Bihar. Now, if Islam was a factor, everywhere Muslims will not practice family planning. And I would dare say that Muslims of South India are better Muslims than we in North India. They practice religion more conscientiously. But you find that 25 states have reached lower than the replacement rate. Replacement rate, for the information of those who may not have heard of it, is 2.1. माँ बाप दो हैं, जब मर जाएंगे तो बच्चे दो उनकी जगह आ जाएंगे, और 0.1 इसलिए कि बीच बीच में बच्चे भी कुछ मर जाते हैं, वो मार्जिन रखने के लिए 2.1. If the total fertility rate is 2.1, that means we have reached the replacement rate. And 24 or 25 states have already reached 2.1 or even lower. That means, as Poonamji mentioned, population stabilization has already been achieved, except by 4 states of the Hindi belt, UP, Bihar, Rajasthan, and Madhya Pradesh. We have to focus on them, but they are also not very far. Within the next 3-4 years, they will also achieve. Now, there is no Hindu fertility rate or a Muslim fertility rate. Look at the next bullet. For example, Muslim TFR ranges from 1.74 in Tamil Nadu to 4.11 in Bihar. अब इसमें से आप किसको मुस्लिम का रेट मानेंगे? तमिलनाडु का 1.7 और बिहार का 4.1 और whatever lies in between. There is no Muslim rate. तमिलनाडु का अलग है, बिहार का अलग है. Similarly, Hindu range from 1.42 in Kerala to 3.29 in Bihar. So because of this variation regionally and statewide across communities, that shows that there is no Hindu or Muslim rate of growth. Now, let us see what is next slide, please. Now, I have mentioned to you 3 factors. Factor number 1, literacy. As the literacy goes up, the fertility goes down. You will notice the very first line, no education, 3 children. 5 years completed, 2.4. And as they keep on acquiring education, 12th class or more, it comes down to 1.71. And this is across communities, not just the Muslims, across all communities. This is the one totally mathematically without exception. Next slide, please. Education delays age of marriage, which in turn reduces the TFR. This is another benefit of education. When there is no education, the average age of, if you see the first bar, the marriage is the earliest among the illiterates. And as the education level is increasing, the marriage is getting delayed, and 12th class or more, it becomes 22.7. Now, 4 or 5 years of productivity, the fertility it gets delayed, and therefore the number of children goes down. So education is the key. Next, please. Now, as the marriage gets delayed, the number of children goes down. So when the marriage was below 18 years, in rural areas, 5.41 children. If you see the higher graph on the top, and as the marriage is getting delayed, the number of children is going down. Similarly, in urban areas, you will see from 4, that is, the graph is even sharper, from 4.6 to 2.52 across communities, mind you again. So that means delayed marriage is the answer. And to delay marriage, education of girls becomes very important, as I have shown you. Next slide, please. Now, factor 2, income. As the income goes up, the number of children goes down. So what should we be talking about? Increasing the income of the Muslims. Have you ever heard these people say that Muslim ke income badhao? You will only hear do their economic boycott, don't buy vegetables from them. अब आप मुस्लिम सब्जी वाले से सब्जी नहीं खरीदेंगे, वो और गरीब होके घर जाके वो और बच्चे पैदा करेगा, फिर आप रोगे. So इसलिए इनकम आपने देखा, अगेन दिस इज अक्रॉस ऑल कम्युनिटीज. तीसरा देखिए, नेक्स्ट स्लाइड प्लीज. Now non-workers have more fertility than workers. जिनको जॉब मिल जाएगी उनके बच्चे कम होंगे, जो जॉबलेस हैं उनके बच्चे ज्यादा होंगे. So मुसलमानों को जॉब देने की बात कीजिए, और या हिंदुओं को भी, जो भी गरीब लोग हैं उन सबको जॉब मिलेगी तो उनके बच्चे ऑटोमेटिकली कम होंगे. नेक्स्ट प्लीज. Where do Muslims stand in all these socio-economic factors जो मैंने आपको दिखाया? Literacy, income, service delivery slide शायद आगे आएगा. Muslims are at the bottom in all the indicators. सबसे कम पढ़े लिखे हैं, which is a pity in itself, because Islam talks of education. The very first word revealed on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was Iqra. Bismika alladhi khalaq. Iqra, read, recite, O Prophet. That is how it began, and how the Prophet had said that education is compulsory for men and women. Acquire education, even if you go to hadith like that. Now, despite that, Muslims are the least educated, which is a pity and shame for our community, and we should introspect. Now, next slide, please. Now, these are the socio-economic indicators. Again, I should could rearrange it. Hindus and Muslims, you will notice, first two bars are Hindus and Muslims, and you will find that they are the lowest. From here, I'm going to make a point in the rest of my presentation that, as I say, it is not a Hindu versus Muslim question. Muslims and Hindus are comrades in arms. They are brothers. They are close to each other. Muslims are at the bottom. Second bottom most are the Hindus, because their socio-economic indicators are also poor, which is why they are both poor in family planning. I've already shown you from first slide. They are number 1 and number 2. Next slide, please. Now, worker population ratio among Muslim men 33 and 15% among Muslims, as against 41 and 27 of Hindus. Worker population of Muslims is the least. Obviously, their economy, they're poorer, and if they are poor, it leads to more children. Next, please. Now, accessing health services. Yeah, this was the slide which should have come earlier. That Muslim women receiving antenatal care from a skilled provider, only 69%, compared to 79%, 80%, 60%. So Hindus have better access to services. And I have seen, and I've heard many times, any Muslim cluster, usko Hindus say, you look, mini Pakistan, mini Pakistan. Now, nobody wants to go to mini Pakistan to deliver services. Now, Poonam ji is a global expert of family planning. When family planning doctor, when family planning services will not be available, how will people do family planning? I think it is a miracle when the service access is so little. Despite that, Muslims are taking up family planning. In fact, let me tell you, although I have mentioned that Islamic scholars are unanimous in saying that sterilization is un-Islamic, 20% of Muslim women have accepted sterilization already. They're even willing to go against Islam to practice family planning. Now, these are figures which we should not lose sight of. Next slide, please. Availability of services. Again, you'll find the first two sets of graphs are Hindus and Muslims. Again, they are shoulder to shoulder, and they are at the bottom, which is why they are number 1 and number 2 in high birth rate. Next, please. Now, family. There is a chapter on family planning in Muslim countries, or predominantly Muslim countries. I wanted to see what is the status. What do they feel about Islam? Whether the ulama or the clerics believe that Islam is against family planning. And you will be surprised to know that Iran, which is the most conservative Islamic country, has the highest family planning acceptance, has the lowest fertility. Their adoption of family planning is extremely high, as you will see in the next table. So why is it that Iran, Egypt, Indonesia, and Bangladesh have almost achieved the TFR below India? We have the privilege of having the oldest program. We introduced national family planning program in 1952, and now here are these Muslim countries, and Bangladesh, which is only 50 years old. They have overtaken India in family planning. Next, please. Here, if you see the last previous slide, please. If you see the last bullet, in Bangladesh and Indonesia particularly, imams and mosques actively propagated family planning. मस्जिद के खुतबे में, जुमे के खुतबे में के बच्चों फैमिली प्लानिंग करो, बच्चे कम करो, अच्छी परवरिश करो, औरतों की अपनी बीवियों का बच्चों का ख्याल करो, ये मस्जिदों में कहा जाता है. तो वहां तो कोई पॉलिटिकल प्रेशर, किसी पॉलिटिकल पार्टी का दबाव नहीं है. वो they spontaneously they believe that Islam is for family planning. Next, please. Now, if you see the bottom, Iran is 1.62. As I mentioned, 2.1 is the replacement ratio in India. Poonamji probably will know what maybe the replacement ratio may be different in every country. So, but in any case, if you see from the bottom, 1.62, Malaysia, Turkey, Bangladesh, they already have much less. And Indonesia is 2.3, which is as close to India. So that shows that Islam is not a restrictive factor anywhere in the Islamic country. Next, please. I have just 2-3 slides more. Next slide, please. Now, I have also, there is a chapter on all the religions, major religions of the world. Why is it that when you talk of family planning, we only scrutinize Islam? Well, Christianity also has a stand on family planning. In fact, all sects of Christians, they prohibit even use of condoms. So, which is why I was just watching television, Tony Blair having 4 children, and we just started discussing, my daughter and I, and we found that he's a Catholic and he doesn't believe in family planning. No, 4 children. He's not a Muslim. So this chapter talks about the stand of all religions on family planning, contraception, abortion, etc., just for the benefit of those who may like to study this. Next, please. Now, population political propaganda. This is one chapter where I've quoted people from the RSS, Vishnu Parishad, and others. Hindus should produce more children, otherwise the Muslims will overtake. Now my publisher was very particular. Their legal team read every word and they insisted every line which I said and every sentence which I uttered, they said, please show us the source. So they insisted. Initially it was irritating for me, but I think they did a good job. About 450 citations in the book. Every word quoted, mentioned in the book has a quotation, has a citation, where we heard it, where was it said. So, and I've already talked about my mathematical model. Next, please. Now, here, as I had already referred to this, that Muslims and Hindus are actually in the same boat. They're so close to each other because they're determinants of family planning behavior. The factors which influence family planning, like literacy, income, and service delivery, etc., they're quite similar. So the least are Muslim, the second least are the Hindus, therefore their family planning is also the least and the second least. Now, the National Population Policy 2000, which had targeted TFR of 2.1 by 2010, has been, to me, and I think Poonamji also said the same thing, it has been quite a success. We are almost there at 2.2. We are there, as many as 25 states have already achieved the target. We would have achieved it 5 years ago if UP, which has come up with a controversial bill, instead of addressing literacy and income of all communities, they want to use it as a political propaganda during election. This policy has been a great success, and I think we are about to achieve all the targets. Next, please. Then where is the failure? Why are we 5 years or 10 years later? National policy wanted it in 2010. Here we are in 2021, and 10 years already late. Because I have noticed and I have documented it, all the plan and policy document did mention that the Muslims have the highest birth rate, but no solutions were offered or attempted. In fact, once I wrote to the Family Welfare Ministry, so what special program have you done for the Muslims? If you think they have the highest resistance, they say, no, we do not believe in a religious distinction. We have program for people in general. I think although it sounds like a very secular statement, but scientifically it's a very silly statement, because people are no target audience. There are segments of target audience. I'm a social marketing man. There are segments, men, women, urban, rural, poor, rich. They think differently, and you have to have a separate strategy for them. If Muslims have the highest resistance to family planning, you must have some program for them to reach out to them. For instance, if some family planning worker comes to me, Quraishi, you have many children, too many children, you should adopt family planning. And I tell him my religion is against it. Do you think he will argue with me? He will just hang his head and go away. Now, we would like to prepare our worker to be able to argue with me. No, you are lying, Mr. Quraishi, you are lying. The Quran doesn't say that. Quran actually is the forerunner of family planning. And here is the ayat, and here is the hadith. And he should have the literature in his hand for him and for me. So, but we have not equipped our people. That is our administrative failure. No training was given to health staff. No fact book or resource book was prepared for health staff, communicator, politician. In fact, I have volunteered, for my book itself is a resource book. I'm offering again through you to prepare a resource book for family planning communicators, pro bono for sure. I have not charged a rupee for any lecture and even the royalty of this book has been donated to charity, because this is my national contribution. Because if I feel I can bring even one Hindu and Muslim together in understanding the right thing, I would have done my job. Now, we also found that political leaders have been indifferent to family planning, particularly after the emergency which Poonamji referred to, that after it was forced down the throat of people, there was so much of reaction that politically it became a dirty word. And I was the chairman of a Government of India committee during the last 6 years, mind you, set up by National Institute of Health and Family Welfare, to see what is the attitude of politicians to family planning. And we studied the parliament questions which were asked in the 3rd, 13th, 14th and 15th and 16th, 4 Lok Sabhas. Yani 20 साल के period में Lok Sabha में किस type के parliament questions किए गए. And to our horror, we found that only 0.15% questions were on family planning. Nobody dared to talk about family planning. It went off political radar, which is perhaps one of the contributory factors which delayed the achievement of targets of national population policy by 10 years. Next, please. Now, what are my recommendations? This is the last slide. That the national population policy is a great idea. Muslims must proactively adopt family planning. Special efforts must be made to educate those who are resistant to the idea of family planning. These people may be Muslim, Hindus, Christians, Sikh, anybody, whosoever is resistant, we have to change his behavior change communication, as Poonamji referred to. Now, true Islamic position must be understood ourselves and propagated. A staff must be trained to answer people's doubts and sensitively. A resource book must be created. Faith leaders must be involved. Ulama, media men may be sent to Iran, Indonesia, Bangladesh, etc. to study the success. आधे दर्जन, 1 दर्जन, 2, 10, 20 उलमा को भेज दीजिए इन कंट्रीज में. वहां से जब सीख के आएंगे तो अपने लोगों को बुलाएंगे. इसी तरह हम वहां के उलमा को अपने कंट्री में बुलाएं और उनके लेक्चर कराएं कि उन्होंने ईरान में और इंडोनेशिया में, बांग्लादेश में कैसे अचीव कर लिया, जो जिसमें हमको डिले हुई, तो उससे हमको भी सीखने को मिलेगा. Then Muslim youth को हम इसमें involve करें. All communities must act together for population stabilization instead of Hindu versus Muslim, and all kinds of false propaganda must be dispelled with a collective effort. This book seeks to dispel that thing, and I'm very happy to tell you there are 139 comments on Amazon from the verified purchases, except for three which came on within the first 2 days. Quraishi, Muslim, buyer, ye wo bakwas. Lekin all of them are 99% Hindus. They've said, oh, fantastic, these facts were not known to us. All the newspapers have carried reviews of this, TV channels have carried articles. They were all, not one has criticized this article and said that anything is wrong, because it's all Government of India data, very constructive. In the last chapter, I have done for which UNFP had come to me to prepare a strategy paper, how to propagate family planning among the Muslims. And in that chapter, I have given complete recommendations, some of which I just now quoted. Thank you very much. Thank you for your patience. I don't know whether I it took more than the time allotted to me. Thank you.
No, you didn't take much time, but it was very forcefully presented. There was no problem. That's fine.
45 minutes, you gave me 45 minutes.
Precise training. Wow, my goodness. Yeah, we are really impressed. So to conclude your talk, before we go on the, before we go for the question and answer session, I am inviting Mr. Pushpet Pantji to conclude the talk, and then thereafter we will take the question.
Thank you very much, sir. I'm very
If
grateful
I
to you.
just Professor साहब एक मिनट, ये आपके introduction में ये बात नहीं आई थी कि Professor Pushpet Pant was a professor in JNU for many years of international relations. He is a professor of law. He is a man of many parts, amazing person, and with tremendous knowledge. And I'm very, very happy that he is giving his comments on my book.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I very seriously believe that the subject has been covered so well by Poonamji and Quraishi Saab that I would only like to mention 2 or 3 things. When I first came across this book, I immediately realized this is one of perhaps the most important books of the year, of the decade. And one could even go further and say that what Quraishi Saab himself said, कि शायद किताब 25 साल पहले लिखी गई होती तो हमारे बहुत सारे सरदर्द आज हमारे जान का बवाल नहीं बने होते. I think the thing I would like to add is, for me, this book goes far beyond the population policy, far beyond demography, far beyond the myths of Islam and family planning. I think it deals with politics of India, and it deals with myths about Muslims, not only family planning, but I think one word which was missing in the discourse this evening was appeasement. And in the book, it is marginally mentioned, but it's like the key word. Whenever the people, there's an old phrase which says there are none as blind as those who don't wish to see. So all these facts, figures, which were so brilliantly put forward by Quraishi Saab in his PowerPoint presentation, probably would appeal to a person who has an open mind, who believes that these sources are genuine and this mathematical model is right. But what do you do to people who have been indoctrinated from their early adolescence, maybe late childhood, by communal zealots who have concocted sources of their own, myths of their own? So I think, given to myself, I would say the book is more about population and other myths about Muslims in India and politics. Now, also, I think, what I found the book absolutely amazing is, it was touched upon that we talk of the Indian Muslim, and we think that Indian Muslim from Kashmir to Kerala, from Bengal and Assam to Rajasthan and Punjab is the same. And some of these things were brought forward by Quraishi Saab this evening. In the book, they are brought. But I think what we open our mind, when he takes up the global picture, we see that there are other major Islamic countries, Indonesia, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Iran, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Egypt. And when you add them together, you see the Islam of the subcontinent, India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan is itself a major chunk of the total Islamic population. Then you add to it Indonesia, then you come to a version of Islam which is very different from the Wahhabi Saudi interpretation of Islam, which at the moment is supposed to be the dominant stream. Now, I think the book should be read by people who are interested in Indian society, not only Hindus or Muslims. He does mention the real minorities, the Sikhs, the Christians, the Buddhists. He goes to not only Christians as a minority in India, he goes to Catholics where there are majority in Brazil, in Mexico, in America itself. And you have interesting situations where you have the latest struggle which is confronted by the US Supreme Court and retrograde going back on progressive legislation or judgments about Roe and Wade, about abortion in Texas and so on. So we have a very interesting situation that it is not only the Muslims in India who, I mean, of course, this myth is explored brilliantly by Mr. Quraishi in his book, but the sad part is that we don't even look at myths about Hindus in India, myths about Christians and Catholics elsewhere. I mean, I recall the incidents. We used to be very unhappy teaching it in the law classes when an Indian who had gone to Ireland, his wife died because it did not allow an abortion there under even life-threatening medical emergency. Now, then once these examples come to your mind, you think through that we have to rethink about the role of religion in a modern liberal democracy, which is by and large secular. And secular doesn't mean being anti-religious. So I think these issues are far more important for me in Dr. Quraishi's book. And I think it deserves to be translated. And I'm very happy to know I suggested this once to Dr. Saab, and he very kindly accepted it immediately. I hope this is translated not only into Hindi, but into other regional languages in India, in Urdu, and is widely circulated. I think, you know what, actually what I would go further and say that anybody who reads this book, not only Muslims, but Hindus, should realize that how much they are being led up the garden path by the myth makers. And myth is a euphemistic term in this context. I would say it is a conspiracy of lies against the Muslims to keep them in their quote unquote proper place. And the Hindu majority dominates, and the Hindus continue to play the victim card. And that's where I wanted to work in the word appeasement, because Quraishi Saab does mention such a committee report at one place. Although his facts, figures, pie charts, holographs very clearly make that Muslims are at the bottom of the social indicators, very close to the Hindus. But the point is, this is not what is being indoctrinated. So when you say, when somebody says that the Muslims have been unfairly treated, you say, oh, you are trying to appease them. So I think the words like appeasement, myth, Islam, and homogenizing the generalized statements about Indian Muslims, I think all that needs to be immediately corrected. Not one, but all these myths need to be busted. And I think we should, Quraishi Sahab has done a great job of going right to the original sources, the surahs in the Quran Sharif, the ayats there, the hadith, the sunnah, and this is what we should, a non-Muslim gets the flavor of the real Islam and the spirit of peace in this, and also its progressive outlook much before the world had thought in terms of Christian Science or trying to reconcile science with their religion. I think this is what is the most brilliant contribution of this book. I can't add more to it. I am a great fan of Quraishi Sahab, and I think his experience, not only as an election commissioner, has given him as a civil servant who has dealt with youth affairs in broadcasting, social communication, has given him this insight. He wants to be on a secure ground. He quotes from government statistics. He goes back to his experience. He goes back to scholars who don't belong to a particular community, and you can't argue with mathematical modeling. So I compliment him for his brilliant book, and I strongly recommend it to all readers. And I thank you for allowing me to say a few words about it.
Thank you, Pushpesh ji. And now, before we go to question and answer session, this is the upcoming event for coming Saturday. A very popular book these days and very high quality book written by Professor Shafiq Qadwai of Aligarh Muslim University, Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, Reason, Religion and Nation. And he will be joining by Vice Chancellor of Aligarh Muslim University, as well as two other professors for opening remarks and concluding remarks. The occasion is 16th, which is also Sir Syed Day.